you all for joining us today for our webinar series called Diversity Dialogue. So my name is Elaine Spector, and I'm a partner at the firm Harrity and Harrity and co-chair of our D&I committee. At Harrity, our mission is to promote and nurture a respectful, highly engaged, family-friendly, and inclusive culture that values the diversity of our talented team with diverse backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, skills, talents, and capabilities. Our diversity programs are focused on serving our communities by helping to increase the number of diverse patent practitioners and enhancing their quality of practice in patent law. So our webinar today is focused on diversity and innovation. And I'm thrilled to have three panelists here who work at companies that are committed to improving diversity and innovation. Thank you all so much for being here. So I want to give a brief intro to the panel following with specific questions regarding diversity and innovation and the specific programs developed at their companies, Facebook, 3M, and Micron, and then opening up the last few minutes for Q&A. So this webinar is intended to be conversational, so please drop your questions in the Q&A section and your comments in the chat. We like this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So our first panelist today is Sandra Nowak. Sandra is Associate IP Counsel of 3M's Healthcare Business Group, which connects people, insights, science, and technology in key markets to solve problems and make better health possible. Sandra is also passionate about diversity and innovation. She helps lead this effort at 3M and around the world in her role as co-chair of the Intellectual Property Owners Association, Women in IP Committee, and Diverse Inventors Subcommittee, where she works with a global group of IP professionals and inventors to advance diversity in the legal profession and in the innovation ecosphere. So in April 2019, and I remember when this happened, Ms. Nowak testified before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee on the topic of trailblazers and lost Einsteins, women inventors and the future of American innovation. And she herself has been a trailblazer in this area. So welcome, Sandra. So our second panelist is Scott Barker, who's Director of Global Patent Development for Micron Technology, where he leads a team of attorneys, agents, and engineers responsible for developing Micron's intellectual property and fostering a culture of innovation. Scott is a member of the Board of Directors of Intellectual Property Owners Association and Intellectual Property Owners Association Education Foundation. I've personally had the pleasure of working with IPO Education Foundation and Scott recently on a networking workshop that we held during the virtual awards ceremony based on the work of Dr. Lisa Cook. It was an amazing event. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Scott. Welcome.
Thanks.
So our third panelist is Charu Kurani, who is the Associate General Counsel of Patents at Facebook. In this role, Charu is the Development and Operations Team Lead, and Charu manages the patent portfolio of Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. So at Facebook, Charu is also leading a diversity initiative aimed at increasing engagement of women in the patent program. In June of 2019, Charu testified on behalf of Facebook at a public hearing on the study of underrepresented classes chasing engineering and science, the Success Act. Charu also recently co-authored an article entitled Uncovering the Hidden Figures of Innovation, published in December 2019 in IM Magazine. So welcome, Charu. It's exciting to have you. So we're here to talk about diversity and innovation. It's been a hot topic for a couple of years now. And as we've seen through some of the studies through the PTO and through some universities, that there's a clear evidence that women and diverse groups are underrepresented in patents compared to their presence in the workforce. So the first question is, why does diversity and innovation matter? So let's start with Scott. For your perspective.
Oh, that's fine. Well, I think the first and foremost, I personally and I think entities believe it's a moral imperative that we really need to ensure that all of our engineers and scientists are bringing their true, authentic selves to work every day and contributing in a way that maximizes that potential. And so we believe firmly in that, and I think that's reflected in our company's vision statement. We actually recently changed our vision statement. It was transforming how the world uses information to enrich life, and now it's transforming how the world uses information to enrich life for all. And that for all perspective has been a very central messaging that's been promoted by our leadership and has been pervasive in our culture. The reason I point that out is I think in our situation, we found that our mission, we don't believe is accomplished unless our solutions are actually doing that, enriching life for all, not just some. And that inherently requires diversity and inclusion in our innovation ecosystem. So we absolutely, without a doubt, need to make sure that we are getting all of that collaboration and contribution by everyone in our workforce, and ensuring we are doing active things to try to improve not just the diversity, but the inclusion of our diverse workforce in these activities. It's that collaboration amongst a truly diverse and inclusive workforce that's the key to unlocking innovation, both inside our company as well as at the suppliers and vendors and customers that we work for. And I think that some of this has been reflected even in our CEO's comments. He's made a few comments recently in some of our diversity and inclusion reports. I thought one that stood out to me was he had a quote in one of our diversity and inclusion reports that reflect that we know innovations are the foundation for our business. I mean, that as a semiconductor company that needs to be on the cutting edge of all technology, we need to be advanced past our competitors. We need to be the first to bring solutions to market. Innovations are critical for the success of our business. And in his comments reflected that best innovation only emerge when you create an atmosphere where all voices can be heard. And I would add to that it needs to be all authentic voices. So that to me is the driver for the importance of diversity and inclusion and innovation ecosystem, as well as all the economic cases that I think I'll give a shout out to the IPO Women in IP Committee's Push Forward Subcommittee's white paper. Sorry, that was a long intro to that on the economics of diversity. And if anybody wants to see some collated studies of the proof of the economic impacts of diversity and inclusion, I'll refer you to those studies, and I'll turn it over to my other panelists for their thoughts as well.
Thank you, Scott. That's a great answer. And that's a great point that diversity, actually, there's tons of evidence and studies about how it improves economic, up to fourfold, some of the studies show. So for a company, thank you so much. And Charu, what are your thoughts on why diversity innovation is important?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo Scott's point that it's built into our mission, right? And so Facebook's mission is building community. And you cannot build community for just some people. You need to build community to bring all people closer together. And so if we're looking at building products for people around the world, we can't look at it from the lens of one type of person. And so it's really important to have a diverse talent pool in order to build those products that apply to everyone and apply to like different subgroups. And so I think it's really part of the mission. Diversity and inclusion is really important to Facebook. And I think it's important to build that community to unite people of all backgrounds with diverse experiences, cognitive and otherwise, perspectives, ideas. And in order to do that, building a diverse team where everyone feels like they belong, can bring their authentic selves to work is crucial. And so hate to like copy what Scott said, but it's really part of Facebook's mission and culture, like bringing your authentic self to work and being able to do that. And so to have truly like diverse products that apply to diverse populations, you need that talent pool. And then on top of that, there's always the business justification, but I think diversity and inclusion is an end unto itself. And so for me personally, that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you. Thank you, Charu. And Sandra, how about you? I know Scott and Charu have offered.
I know. I'm in the cleanup batter. There's not much left. I mean, I agree with, of course, everything they said. And at 3M, this is part of our mission. It's part of our cultural statement. It's part of our key objectives that we're all measured and evaluated on. So I agree. I agree with it being a moral imperative. I mean, I just love the way that's said, and I completely agree. I think one of the ways that I look at it is sort of wrapping up what they said is sort of in 3 categories. It's important for the person, it's important for the company, it's really important for the sort of country and world. I mean, many people are not promoted at the same rate unless they have innovation statistics, unless they're on key programs with innovation on them. And unless people are not promoted, then they're not retained at a company. And if they're not retained, they can't become in a leadership position. And so really, unless we start to really support people throughout that trajectory, and most notably people from traditionally underrepresented groups, you won't have them at all those important points in your employee base. And you need them at all of those points, and really more of them, and more of them willing to bring their so important ideas and authentic self at every stage of those different points. Sort of in the organization, I mean, no one wants their key talent underutilized. I mean, we're competing for these amazing resources. What a waste that we compete with each other for them and then do nothing once we have them there. Let's take advantage of the great people that we hired in the fullest way possible. And let's allow them to really lead the cultural change that I think we're all going through to fully embrace things like psychological safety, intersectionality, and really allowing people to truly bring their full selves and contributions into the workplace. Again, I echo everything that you said about you get better innovation and you get better products when you're developing for the full spectrum rather than a narrow segment thereof. I'll also mention that in addition to just better products, in some areas you develop safer products. I think we're now becoming more and more aware of the way perhaps pharmaceuticals have been developed and not tested on certain groups, and they have disadvantageous or lesser effects on certain groups. And we never knew because we never tested. Same with crash test dummies and car crashes. And I mean, there's just so many examples that sort of prove that point. Better and safer products if we include more people. And lastly, to the country and to the world, one place I want to point out that's not represented on this panel is the entrepreneurship community. The entrepreneurship and innovation community has almost no representation from underrepresented communities. And I think that's a place where we need so much more representation, and we need to support them in different ways that we can, from the chairs that we sit in on boards, in our corporations, on, in the ways that our corporations and law firms can support VC funding. So I think there's so much opportunity to sort of have a say in that entrepreneur community where I think a voice is really needed. And then lastly, sort of maybe just to be overstating it or inspirational, but the world is facing so many problems: poverty, food shortage, disease, global warming. It's going to take all of us in our collective different perspectives working together to solve these challenges. I mean, I think we have reached the point where we can no longer rely on one segment to really move the needle on some of these challenges we all face together.
Sandra, thank you so much. That was a good cleanup.
Summarizing all my great panelists' words.
I completely agree about the diversity and innovation and the ecosystem and how we have to do better in making sure that all underrepresented groups have access to VC and all the mentoring and support that traditionally have been in other represented groups. So I want to move on to our next question. So some resources have identified a number of causes for disparity in innovation, such as the pipeline, a leaky pipeline, and a lack of engagement. What have you found at your respective companies to be the biggest issue with regard to disparity in innovation? And Sandra, I'm going to start with you since I just left you.
All right. Well, I think it's hard to say the biggest because I'd say they're all equally important and they're all essential. So I'm gonna let my panelists choose the biggest. I'm gonna decline on that one. But what I will say is, at least for us, we think they're all equally important, but in our company, sort of the group in our company that drives true action on some of those differs. So pipeline is really something that I'd say our HR and upper level management, they really drive the action in those ways to see change. And, you know, grassroots effort's important there, but it has less of an impact for us on pipeline, with the exception of when you look at pipeline, including sort of K through 12 education. And we have lots of efforts around the company of creating that longer term pipeline. So pipeline short-term and long-term has different sort of stakeholders and owners, certainly an active area for us. The other two, leaky pipeline and sort of engagement, to me, that sort of boils down to culture. And I'd say culture is something that every employee has a role to play. So there's a place where we see a lot of upper level management, but a lot of the upper level management is seeking grassroots ideas for programs and initiatives and actions that they think will move the needle and that they're willing to lead. Because often those grassroots things, they just get more traction, but you're also giving leadership opportunities to people who feel passionate about those areas. So the way we've kind of handled a lot of the cultural changes is support at the top, but ideas supported at the top from grassroots employees. So that's kind of how we kind of look at the ways that we segment those activities.
And kind of giving what you had mentioned earlier, giving voice, that kind of authentic voice to
Yes.
all people, no matter where they are, you know, what their position is within the company. I think that's really important. So Charu, I'm going to move on to you.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the pipeline issue, and I know many people bring this up when you say, oh, we have a problem, disparity in patents with women, with other underrepresented groups. A lot of people brush it off and say, oh, well, it's a pipeline issue without further looking into the data. And I think that's a big mistake, because what we find is, like, yes, of course, there's a pipeline issue. We know women's like 20 to 25% are women in tech as opposed to the majority. But then when you look at that data, there's still a further disparity in terms of patenting and innovation. And so we need to take a look at our programs as patent professionals. And that's where I think I can make a difference. Like I can certainly say that Facebook has a number of programs aimed, just like, you know, 3M, that are aimed at high schoolers, are aimed at colleges, aimed at graduates, aimed at professionals, working moms, you know, that try to bring them into the workforce. But once you get there, I think it's our jobs as patent professionals, IP professionals, to make sure that we're including those already at the company. And then externally, as Sandra mentioned, there's entrepreneurship, there's other like pro bono type of work that you can do with inventors outside of the company as well. But internally, I think we really do need to look at what we can do. And to me, that's not so much changing the inventor, but it's changing the system to meet the inventors where they're at. I think traditionally we've looked at, well, the system should just work, but the system hasn't been working for everybody. And so what can we do right now to change the system to meet inventors where they're at? And so that's kind of where I think the pipeline issue comes in. But then also where we can say, well, yes, there may be a pipeline issue, but let's also take a look at what we can do. And then in terms of the leaky pipeline, by that, I'm there, you know, I think of two things. Like I think of the pipeline as people leave the company, but I also think of the pipeline as people leave the patent program. So what we're trying to do at Facebook is take a look at how, you know, once someone's aware, or, you know, first, are people aware of the program? And that includes our underrepresented inventors even aware of it. Two, have they engaged with the program, or have they hesitated for some reason? Three, once they've engaged, how was their experience, positive, negative? Or, you know, were there things that we can do better in terms of underrepresented groups? And then four, are you going to become a repeat inventor? Like, was there enough mentorship along the way, whether your idea was accepted or rejected, or turned into a defensive publication, or better decided as like a trade secret? was there enough mentorship along the way that you would approach the program again? And so for me, that's a leaky pipeline that I can look at again as a patent professional. And I think there was one more component to your question and I just lost
lack
it.
of engagement. Well, I think the lack of engagement is part of the leaky pipeline. So they're kind of tied together. And it sounds like Facebook has ways now that they've developed ways to engage their diverse community of innovators.
Yeah, we're really looking at that. We actually just sent out a survey, an internal survey to 7,000 inventors. So it was like a sampling of inventors to understand how we can do better as a patent program. And for diverse inventors, what does that better look like? And so that's, we're in the process of analyzing those results. But I can tell you a lot of times it's like women don't have time to do this on the nights and weekends. Underrepresented inventors don't feel comfortable approaching a patent professional, and there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for awareness and education.
And to your point about engaging your underrepresented inventors, I had read something coming out of the Santa Barbara group that studies this issue, and they were talking, or Santa Clara, sorry, they were talking about maybe changing their invention disclosure form to product disclosure form, because they found that women sometimes don't think that their ideas would be considered inventive. So just doing a simple switch seemed to help some innovators say, hey, look, okay, it's a product development form, it's a product disclosure form, I can sit on that idea. So I thought that was a useful tip that I had recently read. So Scott, over to you. What do you think about the root causes?
Yeah, I'll echo what my fellow co-panelists have pointed out, and that is we've almost purposely tried to avoid identifying what we think the biggest root causes, because that almost for fear of it diminishing the importance of any of the other contributors. So I think there's been a conscious effort through various different programs, like what Sandra mentioned, where we have a foundation team here at Micron that is really focused on driving the STEM education components. We have HR and recruiting that's very focused on identifying, where we had gaps in the past on our recruiting efforts. We've got, involved people workforce that's working closely to look at the leaky pipeline program. So it's kind of been a divide and conquer, and almost an intentional effort to avoid saying that there is one singular biggest cause, because again, there's fear that would diminish the impact of those other important factors. What we did within our program is, and by the way, we still actively engage on all those other fronts. So we work on some of the STEM programs. We coordinate and work with the HR department on the recruiting and retention efforts. Try to have active engagements with departments and workforce about those issues. Same thing with engagement. We do annual engagement surveys here at Micron. It's a very focused effort to look at engagement, to understand engagement, what are the drivers behind it, and what we could do to purposefully increase engagement from our entire workforce. But what we did as our department is we sat back and said, let's work with some of the groups that have been historically underrepresented in our data, and work backwards from them to say, okay, what can we do to solve problems that have been unique to your experience, and how do we kind of push those backwards into the program? So for us, the two most critical observations we made on things that we thought we could have a very near-term positive impact on was the development of mentors. There was because of all these contributing factors, there weren't many mentors out there that employees in a historically underrepresented group felt comfortable going to, that they could identify with. So we appreciated we needed to rapidly develop and deploy an entire network of mentors. So we've really focused on that part of the mission, as well as also trying to more actively recruit and engage sponsors and champions around the companies to take this on as an initiative, including a program that we call Innovation Allies, which is something that we're currently trying to explode and grow at the company here. So I kind of pivoted the question back to what we've been doing and where our focus areas have been, as opposed to which we think may be the biggest issue. But I think we have probably consensus on that we all look at them equally importantly and try to ensure that there's conscious efforts to address all of the issues that are, at least those issues that have been identified and known to the community to be drivers on this problem.
So that's a good answer. And it takes us to our next question, because this is a complex issue with varying factors that go into why we don't see consistent numbers with regard to diversity and innovation. So how do you go about addressing, and I'd like to hear from each of you about how you went about addressing those issues within your company. What kind of programs have you developed to help increase the numbers of underrepresented groups being listed on patents and innovation? So I'll start with Charu. I haven't started with you yet.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a number of things we're working on. When we first started looking at this issue, we kind of did what you're not supposed to do. I think we just jumped in and said, let's have a patent harvest. And, we just wanted to do something right away without really thinking, I think, about the inventor and empathizing with the inventor. And so when that totally didn't work, what we actually did was run a design sprint with an external facilitator. It really helped us. And through that experience, we interviewed some women inventors because we were focused on women at the time as a starting point. And we interviewed them and really understood their experience, so akin to the survey that we just put out. And then I think that helped us drive what our goal is. And it's not just like higher numbers of patents, but it's actual increased engagement with the program. And through that, it will be not just patents, but again, DPUBs and other forms of protection, but also just confidence and mentorship in getting through the process and being able to come back again on your own terms and say, I have an idea, I'm an inventor, kind of going to your point. And so one of the things that we started with was highlighting diverse inventors within the company. And so really, I think you see yourself, and we haven't really seen ourselves as diverse people in inventorship. And so we highlighted someone from the AR/VR group that was an underrepresented woman. We hired someone from the Pride group that was an underrepresented woman. And so we've started these in order to show that, one, you don't need to be from a traditional engineering background. You can be a product designer. One of ours was a fine arts major in college, so it shows that you can come from any path and become an inventor. But then it also shows, you can see yourself reflected in those stories. And so that was one program that has actually done really well to increase awareness, one, and then increase engagement. A couple of other things we're doing is small group brainstorming sessions. We're working with one of our outside counsel to kind of develop the best way to have more inclusive brainstorming, because the traditional method is, okay, let's all sit together in a room and typically the loudest person wins, right? And so we're using a different method to solicit ideas and piloting this in some of our AR/VR groups in order to bring that across the company once we've kind of worked out the kinks and see kind of what works for Facebookers, what works for different types of technologies, and then bring that across the company. And that's really like a combination of written idea solicitation, small group brainstorming, where, we've learned that women maybe work more collaboratively and have less hesitation in promoting their ideas in smaller groups. And so kind of following along with that research. And then there's a number of other things we do. We speak at Women in Engineering Days internally, Women in Tech Days internally, to just bring awareness to the program. We're looking at our open source contributors, because I think that's an area that's kind of not really been looked at in terms of underrepresented inventors. And so I could go kind of on. And then the survey was a big one this half where we got that out. But that is to say, I think we're all working on it. We don't have a set of best practices. And so I think that's what we're trying to gather within the community. And hopefully that will let others learn from our do's and don'ts.
Charu, you had mentioned earlier that women may not submit invention disclosure forms because they don't have time. They don't have time on the weekend to work on it. Is there anything that you would recommend to address that issue? I know all the programs are helping.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. And I think COVID hasn't helped, right? When you had no time on the weekend prior to COVID, this is just kind of exponentially grown, that the problem of not having time, right? Because you don't have any downtime when you're at home all the time with kids and that kind of thing. So we haven't implemented anything yet with respect to that problem, but some ideas can be giving time on the job to do that kind of thing. We try to run as efficiently as possible and take as little time of our inventors as possible. And so being as least intrusive as possible as patent professionals, it really helps. And being available through different channels is also really helpful, right? Some inventors prefer email, some inventors prefer the portal, some inventors prefer a quick chat over Messenger. Some inventors prefer, and let's try to meet them where they are, and let's try to work with them in the way that works for them. And so it's not always easy, given that we're pretty lean teams, but we try to do our best to kind of get in and get out and get on, right? Because they have other priorities that they're working at. But if anyone else has ideas, obviously we're totally open to hearing those.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move on to Scott. I know you have a couple of on your background. I see Women's Leadership Network, Women Innovate. You mentioned the Innovation Allies program. We'd love to hear about the certain programs that Micron has implemented to address this issue.
Let me go ahead and take myself back off mute. So I'll go through a little bit of our history, because we really started actively engaging on this right about the time that IPO's efforts really engaged on the Gender Diversity and Innovation Toolkit. Perhaps we'll talk about that a little later in the program, but I will say that we were a benefactor from being able to basically trial some of that program during its active development as the Innovation Toolkit was being actively developed, which was a really unique experience for us, because we were able to try some of our own things, listen to what the community was coming up with through the development of that toolkit, and kind of actively try that before the toolkit even came out. So I'll give some early props to that program, because it was very instrumental in helping us to where we got, even though we didn't have it in a final form as we were working on it. But our efforts really started first by recognition. I mean, it was something we started looking through our data and recognizing where we had some critical challenges at, and some important problems. And that was twofold, both within the patent team community. We recognized some issues. We also had engineers and scientists that were in the innovation community that separately came to us at the same time and said, hey, we had a big company celebration event for our innovators. And and we had one of our colleagues, somebody that was one of our co-founders in our Women Innovate program, made the realization as she was at that event that she was seeing a lot of her colleagues, her fellow women engineers, but recognized that they were there as spouses of their husbands who also happened to work for the company, and said, well, something is off here. Like, why are they here as spouses, not as the innovators? And so really we launched into our efforts with that kind of combined meeting of the minds around this issue. And we first started with what we called brown bag programs. So we basically went out and had open brown bags just to get information from the community about what they were observing, their experiences, we would talk a little bit about our program, and then enter in some Q&A to figure out where some holes were and why we were experiencing some of these disparities. From there, we trialed some various different trial programs on different ways to do it, including some things that Charu mentioned, where we'd have some patent harvesting sessions, invention harvesting sessions, and other, short-term events just to see what would work. And then that morphed into what you see on my virtual background here, what we call the Women Innovate program at Micron. And that was our first big success as we developed that program. And it came through that whole timeline of events where ultimately we realized what we needed to do was try to quickly develop a culture where we had a lot of mentors that, our particular first target was on the women engineers and scientists, a lot of mentors that were comfortable holding themselves out as mentors, that gave confidants and people in the circles of trust of those in the community to go to help address these issues. That was what we thought we could have the optimal effect of our bandwidth and the opportunities there. So our Women Innovate program is really built around that, and it's now something we try to do 2 to 3 times a year in terms of actually planned sessions, where we have basically it's something we did in partnership with the organization you see on my screen, the Women's Leadership Network here at Micron, and it's a very rich program that's been developed, and it's pretty much all volunteer based. I mean, we really went out and found champions for this within the engineering community that had a passion for doing this, because we didn't want somebody that was not motivated by passion to do this, because we realized this takes time in the evenings and weekends to do. This is not something you can just fit within your day job, and we didn't have head count to basically hire in and build programs around this. We had to find interested participants who are passionate about this, and that network has been growing as we've had success with the program. We have more and more people that are interested in being on that leadership team, in expanding the program into lots of different locations. Most of our workforce is based on my team, which is myself and 5 others, including one of our participants today on the attendee line, Joan Arbolante. Almost all of us, except for one, are located in Boise and San Jose. And so we really focused our efforts there because that's where we could have the most hands-on impact. We understood the US legal system the best, so we thought we could work with some intricacies there and really quickly develop a program, and then try to expand it globally to all of our other locations around the world. And what that involves is we do have programs where we bring in and actively recruit mentees into the program. They're interested in learning about this experience. Oftentimes these are engineers or scientists that really, they don't have somebody already within their group that's kind of teaching them the ropes, or they're perhaps starting in positions where innovation that would lead to patents versus innovations that lead to trade secrets just isn't in their work definition right now. And we give them some early exposure to the patenting system. We lead focused brainstorming sessions through this. We work really closely with the mentor team to kind of vet the types of ideas that they're going to be working on, so that we have the most optimal chance of success in terms of patents. We try to invest a lot of time up front to have focused efforts by those teams, as opposed to letting them work on things that maybe just don't even align to things that we would ever want to patent. that way we can ensure that we get to talk about the nuances of what leads to a good patent, what leads to a good disclosure, how to work with patent committees, all those sorts of know-how type things that we want to create a culture here of paying it forward. And the expectation in our program that's unique is not necessarily that you join this program to get a patent. It's you join this program because you want to be a mentor. And that is our expectation, is you come into this program as a mentee. Yes, you'll get the benefit of learning about patents. You'll get the experience of working on a patent. But what we ask back in return is engagement to then serve. First is what we call a mentor in training, is the next phase of our program. Where basically you partner with somebody that's already a mentor. You make that transition from a mentee to a mentor, but we have a kind of a transitional phase. And then in your third session, you should then be in a mentor role where you're helping your other colleagues in that identified group work together on this program, again, with the express purpose of becoming a mentor and establishing more of a culture of champions out there. I know I'm going really in depth on this one. It's been our flagship program that we are now expanding to work with other employee resource groups around the company. So it started with our Women's Leadership Network. We're now taking this same model into all of our other employee resource groups, because that's where we find the passion is in terms of people that can help support the program, do the outreach for the program, champion the program. We really work closely with our employee resource groups to do that part of it. And then through that, we're also developing what I mentioned was this allyship network, where we're actively recruiting and asking people to hold themselves out as innovation allies and really, become a trusted person, not necessarily to work within the brainstorming groups themselves, but to be an advocate for their innovations, to help them understand some of the know-how, some of the subtleties, some of the things you don't find training materials on, and really establish a rich culture of innovation allies that all employees can feel comfortable reaching out to help them on this journey. So anyway, I ate a lot of time there, so I'll stop.
No, I appreciate that, Scott. And just one more question about your Innovation Allies program. Is it a one-on-one thing, or is it kind of a group program where the mentees attend?
All of our programs are meant to be group based because for scalability purposes, we want to make sure that we don't, take one person, develop them, and then all of a sudden, have all of their resources used with another small group. So all of our models are developed to be a group mentoring or group accessibility.
Well, you have a huge network of employees, so I can't imagine that the one-on-one would be.
Especially for a multinational company where maybe you have an expert in one location. We need to make sure that they're accessible to all of our other locations around the globe for people that are also in that technology area. And so sometimes, there's only a finite number of those subject matter experts, especially those that are passionate about being an ally. Yeah. Granted, I think there's a growth in that, and the growth in people wanting to be allies and actively working on being an ally, not just saying it, but doing it, has really increased. And what we found to be the biggest driver in that is our entire company launched allyship training, and we invested a lot of resources at every employee level within the company. Every team member was, as part of our incentive plan, was required to participate in these allyship training programs, and that really has exploded a culture of allyship around the company.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Sandra, what kind of programs has 3M implemented to address the issue?
Well, for the sake of time, I will say that we have many of the same programs that both Micron and Facebook have, and I don't want to skip over them, but in the interest of time, I will say, coaching and mentoring programs, so important. I think that, celebrating our inventors, that visibility piece, so important. The STEM pipeline programs, so important. And like these great companies, we also have many of those. So I'm just going to focus on the things that we have that maybe we haven't mentioned yet. The first thing that I'll say is, and I know that both Micron and Facebook have these too, but I can't emphasize enough that, statistics show that if we continue at the current trajectory, we will not reach parity and innovation until 2092. And really, if we're each operating and running fast and hard in our individual silos, in our individual companies, we're going to get there a lot slower than if we communicate and band together. And so, I have spoken with Scott and Charu on this issue more times than you can imagine. And I learn something every time. Like, I honestly have so much respect for Charu and for Facebook to be willing to take that brave step and say, we tried this and it was a mistake. Honestly, sharing the things that didn't work is so powerful, and it takes so much leadership and bravery. And so I want to applaud the companies that are out there and willing to have those conversations, like Facebook, like Charu. For Scott, I love that he's willing to go into the details of the secret sauce of Women Innovate, so that all of us can take notes diligently and copy that, and that Scott wants us to copy it. Scott would promote, and I know Scott, he would answer questions if you called him to help you get something similar, and what works and what doesn't work. And to me, this is an area where, unlike so much of IP, which is sort of secret, held close, this is an area where so many of us want to collaborate and communicate and share successes and share failures and pick each other's brain. And so take advantage of that. I think that this is one of those really wonderful opportunities for the IP and technical community to really do that. So I don't want to let that go unnoticed, because I think it's such an important thing to remember as we have these panels and these discussions. The other thing that I'll say is that I think that one thing that I'll note is all of these programs are so important and so essential. But the other thing that I found that's really important is action. Not action of setting up programs, but action of seeing people of underrepresented communities put in high positions. And so 3M is very public about who they're putting where and their statistics, because once internal metrics are so important and so valuable. Once you publish them, you are really held to the fire on them by your stakeholders, by your communities. And so I think we've intentionally put people in positions, sometimes even stretch positions, and then support them to succeed in those positions. And I think those visible actions are so important, in addition to all the really important programs. And then the last thing I'll say is, Charu got the really tough zinger question about the busy inventor. That one is really near and dear to me. I was at a PTO roundtable in California a number of years ago, and it was with the local Congresswoman, I'm pretty sure it's Lofgren. And
with her,
I will never, thank you, Charu. I will never forget one of the inventors from Google really passionately, you were there too, Charu. She really passionately stood up and she said, yeah, all this is great, but you know what? I cook dinner, I grocery shop, I do our laundry. And quite frankly, I don't have time to do this too. And to me, it was such a wake-up call that there is time for everyone to do everything. We just need to prioritize. And so to Charu's point, managers, technical managers, giving people, saying, this is an important activity and we are giving you time to do it. And here's the time in your workday to do it. And as IP professionals, to what Charu was saying, I think that we need to be, I know it blows up people's minds, but more flexible in how we're getting inventions submitted. During COVID, I have been, in our view, sort of incredibly permissive. Sometimes people send me videos, and I gotta say, a video of your actual widget working, not only is it not our standard process, but actually I love it. It's so much better. We can stop frame it, send it to the illustrator. You can see how it works in 3 dimensions. I love it. Another one that we've advised people to do during COVID times, we'll send people dictaphones. While you're walking around folding laundry or something, if you want to just dictate your invention and the general thoughts, it saves you time. And quite frankly, in some ways, we get more and better information than we do when people have to sit and type it out. So I think that as we expand our ideas of what's permissible to help broaden people's scope and ability to access the system, we only get better as a community to welcome people from all different situations.
I wanted to take a second to piggyback on Sandra's mention of community, building community. One of the things we're doing, the USIPA and UC Berkeley is actually putting on a conference at the end of July on the topic of diversity and innovation. It's 4.5 days from July 26th to July 29. And you can find the registration information off of the USIPA Alliance LinkedIn or website. But the purpose of that is we've had so many great people talking about this issue, like Sandra, like Scott, and I think it's so important to make sure that we can have those conversations with people across the community. So different stakeholders, we're going to have inventors, we're going to have academics doing research on something that you mentioned, like framing the invention disclosure as product versus invention disclosure form, and then also people from the patent office, and we have partners such as like Anita B, IPO, National Society of Black Engineers. And so I think I just want to encourage everyone to attend. There'll be panels on how to get your data, how to tweak your program, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how to advocate for this on a legislative level. So I think kind of from all walks that a company would go through. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks for letting me pitch that, and hope to see you all there.
Absolutely. Charu, if you could put it in the chat, the registration, I think that would be awesome. So our attendees have access to it. So I know we're closing up. We have about 5 more minutes, but I do want to provide some recommendations that you would give a company starting this process. I know that Scott, you had mentioned, and I know that Sandra, you have worked on through the IPO, the Gender Diversity and Innovation Toolkit. Is that a great place to start?
Well, I'm biased, but I think so. I think the Gender Innovation Toolkit is a great place to start. You know, it certainly includes the word gender in the title right now, but the principles of it apply to increasing the diversity and innovation ecosphere on a broader scale. It's a publicly available, very accessible tool that I think can get you started thinking, and then includes about 50 different companies, sort of their ideas for best practices and programs you can run based on the root causes you're seeing in your organization. So I will do my best to put that in the chat as well.
I think Samantha just put it in.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Samantha knows I'm not terribly tech savvy. Thank you, Samantha.
I agree. I mean, it was, for those that aren't familiar with that toolkit, it is explicitly intended to be a starting point for where you can go to find a collection of best practices, best resources, practical things to try. So if you're looking to embark on this journey, it was designed for that purpose. And I think we have gotten incredible feedback on it. So please take a look.
We have also used it, and I just have to say it's a compilation of so many different things, from an elevator pitch for executives to ways to tweak your patent program. And so we've used it extensively.
Excellent. And one last shout out that I'll mention about the IPO toolkit. You know, for those who are at law firms, so outside counsel, there's an entire outside counsel portion of the toolkit on, you know, ways that outside counsel can better partner and deepen those partnerships with their clients on this issue. So that's another important part of the toolkit I want to call out to our attendees. I know Elaine is very aware of it. We've been very actively working on it. So I want to make sure that gets a great shout out too.
Excellent, great. And that was going to be our last question. I know I said the other one was our last question, but what can law firms do? And Sandra, you said there's access to the toolkit, but just briefly, what can law firms do to help with this process?
Well, I think, you know, it sounds so simple, I shouldn't even mention it, but honestly, the first and most important thing a law firm could do, reach out to your client and say, like, hey, we're really interested in this issue. We feel passionate about it. How can we help you? Start the conversation, because I think that sometimes we're all just so busy getting stuff done on a daily basis, we don't necessarily immediately think, what can our law firm do? But once you initiate that conversation, I think you might get a lot of traction and creative, unique ideas and room to brainstorm with us. What are ways that you see you can help us? So I guess the first and most important thing I'd say is just begin the conversation.
I agree with Sandra's observations, because if we have firms that are reaching out to us and saying, hey, we want to be on this journey, we want to understand the issues, we want to participate in this, all of a sudden I know I've got a partner that I can collaborate with, and that when we do, different sessions or want to bring in outside counsel for something, I know I have a resource there that I know is going to be passionate about it, know is going to be engaged on it, and hopefully we'll keep it fun, because that was going to be my one suggestion. And going back to a point that Charu mentioned about how do you address this issue of particularly like our women in the workforce that have so many competing demands at home after work. What we have heard back from our community is the element of fun has really got them to stay more engaged. So, instead of some activity on the weekend that, they might have, the one example I hear often is, I'm no longer binge watching something on Netflix because I'm having so much fun in this program that I'm spending time on the weekend working on this program, because we realize that time is in so much demand with everybody's competing obligations and the demands on them and their personal lives, that we found by always having an element of fun to these programs, you get more engagement when you do have to go to that extra above and beyond the call of the normal workday.
Thank you so much for that, Scott. Charu, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just going to agree, and then also kind of point out that there are techniques that you can use to solicit better inventions. And I think another piece of the puzzle is really making sure the inventorship on the patent application reflects all the inventors that were participating in the inventive process. And we're not leaving out diverse inventors. I mean, obviously it's a legal obligation, but it's also an ethical one, right? To make sure that we're not leaving out diverse inventors, and make sure we're properly including everyone that participated in the process.
Absolutely. So it looks like we're up on 1 o'clock. I want to thank the three of you so much for your time and your commitment to this issue. And also, Charu has that link to that other webinar where they're going to have other tools for companies that are interested in starting their own program. It's such a worthy issue. And please feel free to reach out to me or to anybody else on this panel to get some more resources and feedback. We'd be happy to help you and provide you any kind of support that you need. So thank you again.
And one last thing, the webinar has been recorded, so I will send all of our attendees a follow-up email, and I'll include all the panelists' contact information. I know there were some questions that came through that we didn't have time to address, so please feel free to reach out to the panelists with those questions so you guys can discuss offline. And thank you again, everybody who joined us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like looks like most of the attendees have dropped off. I didn't know if we were taking any Q&A through our rest of our time, or I guess we're probably past the hour.
Yeah, I think people were putting their questions in the chat. So, and the only one that came through the Q&A was about your Innovation Allies program, Scott.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and just for those on the audience, that's something that's still in development. Actually, it was Joan, I think, is off the call, but it really came from a suggestion that Joan had. So if she was still on the call, I was going to give her an opportunity to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear more about that program. That sounds wonderful. I know a lot of companies are, and IPO has, we had a whole slew of sessions on allyship, obviously, that you participated in as well. So I would love to hear more about that as you guys develop it.
I love the concept of train someone to be a mentor. I mean, I have to say, I've been asked to be a mentor, but I never got any training. I feel like I'm still winging it. I would love to get training even now.
Yeah, it's been a developmental journey for all of us because we particularly as we've tried to expand it internationally. There's a lot of challenges to that,
right?
That's been where we're going through some growth pains on it now, as well as some of the stuff we talked about in our panel pre-meeting on the how do you deal with those engineers and scientists that are working in areas that we very purposely don't want to publish because it's all trade secret technology, and how do we adapt our programs there. Don't have all the answers, but we're committed to finding real world solutions to these very difficult problems.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much, Elaine. You make it easy.
You guys make it easy. And thanks, really, your companies are doing so much in this area, and so it's a great example. And thank you guys for your time and being able to, and also your openness and transparency and giving the information that, to your point, Sandra, just how open you all are with regard to your own programs that have been developed and being able to share that with others. So I think that's so helpful. It is a collaborative effort. So really appreciative.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Take care.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.